Hello students, here's a quick chapter-wise compilation of important topics that you can go through for the ICSE Class 10 EVS exam. The first chapter is controlling air pollution. Now this chapter has been divided into three subtopics. The first one is control of air pollution from domestic combustion. The second one is from industries and the third one is from vehicles. Now for each of these three, what you need to focus upon are the different strategies. You need to come up with as many solutions as possible for controlling air pollution from each of these three. For example, when we talk about the control of air pollution from domestic combustion, you need to speak about clean fuels. Here, they have specifically mentioned about kerosene. So kerosene, you can talk in detail about how kerosene is a cleaner cooking fuel in comparison to using wood. But you can also talk about other clean fuels like use of cow dung cakes or use of biogas to the kitchens. So any kind of clean fuel, if you give it as an example, that will definitely help you to reduce pollution from domestic cooking. So that is something that you can speak about or focus upon over here. The second part is the control of air pollution from industries. Now, for industrial air pollution control, there are several devices that are available, like you have filters or settling chambers. They have mentioned it over here. There are many energy efficient devices and clean technologies, or we have wet scrubbers, electrostatic precipitators, several technologies that are used or which are being used in the industries currently for controlling the air pollution. We also have energy efficient devices, such as there are a lot of the electricity generation in industry is used actually as a byproduct of something else. So this is also clean technology example which can be mentioned when you're talking about air pollution control from industries. There's also a very important topic over here which has been asked repeatedly in several question papers, that is zoning strategy. So you need to tell about what zoning strategy is. Zoning is where we have division of area, that is a separate area for industries, another area for residential belt, and in between the residence and the industrial area there would be a green belt. That's what is called as zoning strategy. So zoning is a question that has been repeatedly asked in the question papers, and it is very important. Along with knowing what is zoning, you should know the benefit of zoning as well. That's also something that they can combine and ask you for a long answer question. Apart from this, another question which I have seen has been repeatedly asked is the case study of the Taj trapezium. So you should know what the Taj trapezium or the Taj trapezium zone is. It is the designated area of 10,400 square kilometers around the Taj Mahal, so that the monument can be protected from environmental pollution. So you should be able to tell what it is. You should be able to describe why this was required, because the Taj Mahal was getting corroded by the acid rain and it was getting chipped and yellowed because of all the air pollution that was happening from the oil refineries nearby. And that is why they came up with this zoning of the Taj Mahal, that is Taj trapezium zone. So it can be asked like this, or they could even ask you in the abbreviation form as TTZ. That is also correct. So you need to know about mainly the zoning strategy and the Taj trapezium zone, along with the names of a few control strategies for controlling air pollution from industries. The third one is from vehicles. From vehicles, we know that there's a lot of pollution that's happening. So how do we do it? We can do it by either modifying the engine design. So you can talk about the different type of engines we use over there, like 4-stroke engines, or using catalytic converters. Again, here we can employ cleaner fuels. You can use, instead of using petrol or diesel, we can go for cleaner fuels. Here in this topic, something that's very important is the use of public transport. So what is the benefit of public transport is something that you should know. Benefit of public transport in reducing the air pollution from vehicles, how it is reducing the carbon monoxide emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, the nitrogen oxide emissions, how we can have more number of people traveling in the same vehicle, and because of which the fuel is being saved, there is less traffic congestion. So you should be knowing about the benefits of public transport. This is again something that has been asked repeatedly. And of course, along with that, knowing the economic policy measures and traffic management will complete the syllabus for this chapter. But if you ask what are the important questions that have been repeatedly asked, zoning and the benefits of zoning, using clean fuels both in vehicles as well as for cooking. So you can, they may even ask you as clean cooking strategies. That's also a term that they can use. Use of public transport, use of CNG in public transport. That's again something that they can ask you from this chapter, that is controlling air pollution. Okay, so the next chapter that we have is addressing population. Now this is divided into 4 parts. However, part B and part D are not to be tested, and it is only for you to know what's there in it. So the topics on demographic transition and the development framework for poverty alleviation will not be asked in your exam specifically. But of course, it is useful to know these topics so that you can include them in your answers from part A or part C. Now here, the subtopic A or part A is basically the link between growing population and environmental degradation. So what you are expected to know over here is how overpopulation, this is the term that they might use, how overpopulation can have an impact on environment. This is something that is very important. How the population explosion or overpopulation is actually leading to the environment's degradation, or what impact it is having on the environment, is something they can ask you for a long answer question. So you need to tell about how the increasing population or the population explosion has led to the biodiversity being harmed because their habitat is being eaten up, or how there is depletion of the resources, all the natural resources are getting depleted, or how the waste is getting piled up. There's too much of waste and we do not know what to do with it. These are all, or change in the land use pattern. All of these are the changes that have happened, or the impact of overpopulation, the impact of growing population. So they may either ask you as impact, or they may ask you to give a correlation between the population explosion and environmental degradation. You need to talk about what is the impact it has. This is something that has been asked in many papers. The next part in this that you should be knowing is what is the difference between population increase in developing countries and developed countries. Now this developing versus developed countries, okay, developing countries versus the developed countries debate is something that is there in your other chapters as well. So they can actually combine that and ask as well to you in your exam. What are they asking here, or what are they expecting you to write? Developing countries has more numbers of people, or there is more population, growing population is there in those countries, so they need more resources, there is more consumption, they have to they require more food, or there's more pressure on every sector for more output. Their demand for resources is also high. The pollution that they cause is more, the waste that is generated is more, correct? But on the other hand, developed countries, even though the population is lesser when we compare them with developing countries have very high consumption. The amount of electricity that they need is much higher than that of the developed countries. So, the resources are being used. In fact, for every 1,000 individuals, 3 to 4% of the Earth's resources is being used in the developed countries in comparison to 9,000 individuals of the developing. Look at the ratio. It's very, very, skewed. So you have developed countries also having a lot of consumption of the resources, though their population is not as high. And in developing countries, obviously the consumption is required more because their numbers are also very high. So this kind of comparison they may ask you to present. But normally from this part, from topic A, what they ask you is usually the impact of overpopulation or population explosion on the environment. Then we come to part C. Part C is strategies for controlling. This is something very important because they would like to know how would you control the growth of population. How can you what are the strategies that you have for controlling the population explosion? Now under this, of course, all the strategies are important, but two which are really very important and which can be even asked as a separate question would be the use of education and the use of women-centered development. How women-centered development or educating women can actually help in controlling population, and in general, how can education help to ensure that people are more aware and how they the population control can be taken place. So generally, women-centered development or women-centered education, and overall the benefits of awareness and educating people. This is something you should know because it helps in controlling the growth of population. All right, so coming to the third chapter, that's managing the urban environment. So this is all about urbanization. First of all, you should know what urbanization is, and then you need to know about the challenges of urbanization. This is something that's very important. They have been asking repeatedly over the past few years. So you should know what are the challenges of urbanization. What are the challenges of urbanization? You have exploding population, so there's more of unemployment, more of poverty. There's poor infrastructure, very scarce resources of food and water, overcrowding, which leads to poor sanitation and a lot of health problems and spread of diseases. So challenges of urbanization is something that you need to absolutely know about in this chapter. That's the first thing you should know about. What is the problem with urbanization, or what are the challenges that effective urbanization faces? The second part that, or the second one of the topics that has been quite asked over here from this chapter would be the concept of urban slums. So you need to know the concept of urban slums. What are urban slums? Why are urban slums coming up? Now, this topic actually comes under shelter and transport. So if you see over here, due to migration of people, where there are a lot of people migrating from the rural areas into the urban areas, it leads to the formation or the cropping up of urban sprawls and urban slums. So you should know what these two are. Mainly you should be knowing about urban slums. That's something that they have asked. So urban slums come up very quickly. They are basically unplanned regions, unplanned and very densely populated regions where there's a lot of sanitary troubles, where there's a lot of poverty. Too many people are there in a small area. So that comes under urban slums, is a topic or a concept that comes under shelter and transport. But then this is one of the problems that's really plaguing the urbanization. So under urbanization, how do you improve the environment? For that, there are different topics that have been given, like have efficient land use, you plan the energy, how you can distribute it evenly, shelter and transport, water supply management, wastewater, waste management, construction activities, so on and so forth. But under this, one of the most important ones is about shelter and transport. And then we will be looking at waste anyway as a separate chapter, so we'll not deal with it over here. The next topic that's very important from this chapter, and again which has been asked repeatedly, is about migration. So how do we control migration? How do we counter migration? There are mainly two ways in which you can counter migration. Either ensure that the rural areas are developed. So rural development is one method by which we can actually counter the migration. And the second part is development of the secondary cities. So ensure that there are other cities which are being developed in the vicinity, so that some of the population goes over there. So the whole concept of migration and what is the problem with it? So it leads to too many people in the urban environment. So how do we counter it? We can counter it either by rural development or by formation of secondary cities. Now, how would they ask you this in the exam? They can either ask you individually. So they can ask you describe the development of secondary cities role in countering migration. They could either ask you like this, or they may just give you the topic of migration and ask you to come up with strategies for countering it, under which you have to write both rural development as well as the development of secondary cities. The other question that has been very, very commonly asked is the use or is the role of community participation. You have to know absolutely what is community participation. So community participation is where the community gets involved. In what? In, they take up the leadership roles. They have an improved sense of employment. They ensure that the area is kept clean. So they are improving the sanitation of the region. There may be a lot of private enterprises which help in improving the city. So these private enterprises might be run by individuals, or they are run by very big corporates. So what you should be knowing is what is community participation and how does it help in managing the urban environment. So you should be knowing that community participation is where community steps in to help the government, and how are they helping to manage the urban environment. So you can just write a few pointers on how they help to manage the environment. So again, a quick look at this chapter. You should know what are the impacts or the challenges of urbanization. You should be knowing about the concept of urban slums. Then you should know about the different methods for countering migration. And lastly, how community can participate to make the environment better. Chapter 4 is managing soil and land, which mainly includes the different conservation strategies for soil. And this is something that you should know about, very, very important in this chapter, various soil conservation or land conservation strategies. So that has been listed out over here. You should be knowing the different types of how we can use appropriate cropping systems for soil conservation, or what we can do in land use management, how we can have different kinds of mechanical practices, or even conserving the water can actually help in conserving soil as well. So these are some of the things. Again, here the cropping practices is something that is overlapping with the other chapters as well. But then soil conservation strategies is something that is very, very important. They can either ask as soil conservation strategies or soil conservation techniques. So you should be knowing about how we can control the soil conservation, or how we can conserve soil using these techniques. You should also be knowing about erosion control, though not commonly asked for a long answer question, but then again, you should know about erosion control strategies as well. Now, you will be, happy to know that the strategies often overlap. I mean, what saves the soil from eroding is the same thing that is also going to help you in conserving the soil. Maybe a few extra points in soil conservation, that's all. But then you should be talking about how planting the tree cover is, if you increase tree cover, automatically your water becomes better, the soil is not eroding. So if soil is not eroding, automatically the soil gets conserved over a longer period of time. There's also something about land reforms. There's a small topic that's given here, which is basically how you can, the distribution of land from the rich to the poor is, or to those who are landless, is actually done in the land reform. So it's basically the redistribution of land. You should know about the meaning of integrated rural development, which is, under that, what they would ask you is what is the use of self-help schemes. So community forestry or social forestry, these are two terminologies that they can ask you either in your MCQs or in your long answer as well. So community forestry or social forestry is where the public steps in, the community steps in to conserve the forest. So this comes under integrated rural development, but you need to mainly know about the social forestry and community forestry. Again, role of women, role of community in soil conservation, very, very important. Anywhere you see, if there's women empowerment, if there's women education in making something better, to control population, or to improve the natural resources, to conserve the natural resources, it is an important topic. It's something that can be asked for a long answer question. Combating deforestation. Now, this is specifically with respect to forests. So here, what they're asking you is how can you ensure that deforestation doesn't occur, or even if it is occurring, how do you ensure there are other methods by which you can get back the forest cover. Now, under this, something that's very important is energy plantations. This is a topic that you should know about, absolutely. Can be asked for a descriptive answer or even for an MCQ. So energy plantations is something that you need to, look into in detail what they are. So you are basically growing species of trees or shrubs which can be harvested in a very short time, and that can be used as firewood or fuel, so that people don't have to cut down the trees that take a longer time to grow. So that is something called as energy plantation, very important concept. Okay, another thing which has been repeatedly asked from this unit is about overgrazing. So overgrazing or forest grazing, how that can be controlled, what are its downsides, what is the effect of forest grazing, or what is the effect of overgrazing on the land, how that can be controlled, what needs to be done. This is something that you should know about. So consequences and the causes of overgrazing is a topic from this chapter which is really important. Again, alternatives to timber, we'll see that this topic, alternative to timber, or this recycling of timber, is something that again comes up in the last chapter when we are talking about recycling. So this is all about managing soil and land, focus on soil conservation strategies. So focus on the social forestry, community forestry, role of women and community in conservation of soil, energy plantations, and overgrazing. These are some topics that you can focus more on in this chapter. Next, we have the chapter on food. Very, very, very important chapter, because they have been asking several topics from these for MCQs as well as for descriptive questions, mainly in descriptive questions. So, this is a chapter that you cannot leave out. Under food chapter, the first part is sustainable agriculture. Anywhere you hear the term sustainability or sustainable development, it is important. So sustainable agriculture, what it is or how is it helping you. So under sustainable agriculture, again, you have several subtopics which I have seen have been, separately asked as well. I mean, apart from asking you about sustainable agriculture, they have even asked about integrated pest management, that's IPM, or genetically modified organisms, that is GMO, or the use of, last year they have asked about the use of high yielding varieties. So these are all topics that come under sustainable agriculture. So sustainable agriculture on the whole is a really important topic that you need to focus on. So we are, in this, we are trying to, what it says is we are trying to increase the production of food because of the ever growing population without damaging the natural resources for the upcoming generation. That is what sustainable agriculture means. So how do you do that? How do you establish that? How can you have more food for the current generation without putting too much pressure on the natural resources, is what sustainable agriculture talks about. So this is something that's very important. Then we, under this, we also have mixed cropping. Again, a question that I have seen has been repeatedly asked. In fact, in one of the years, I think it was in 2018, they had even asked another name of mixed cropping, which is called as Bara Naja. So Bara Naja is another term, a more local term that's used for mixed cropping. Advantages of mixed cropping, the disadvantages of mixed cropping, what mixed cropping is, all of this is something that has been coming up in the question papers repeatedly. Mixed cropping, crop rotation, again something that's very important and something you all have been studying about since your lower grades. Last year they had in fact asked about the difference between polyvarietal cultivation and polyculture. They are two different things. So what is the the difference between these two terms is again something they had asked in the 2023 paper. Conservation tillage farming, again a question that keeps coming up. Conservation tillage farming, what it is, or what are its advantages, what are its disadvantages. So you should be able to describe that about conservation tillage farming. Even if you do not know the different types of conservation tillage farming, it's okay, but ensure that you do know what are its advantages and disadvantages, how it actually improves the nutrient efficiency, how it helps you to do weed control. That is something, advantages and disadvantages is something that's very, very important for conservation tillage farming. Next part is trickle drip irrigation, again something that keeps coming up in the question papers. So trickle drip irrigation has been, I think last year also they have asked, or the year before that. So trickle drip irrigations, again look for or focus on the advantages and disadvantages of that, how exactly it helps in making the whole process more economical, or how it ensures that the fungal infections don't happen very often. Those are the advantages. The next part is about new organic fertilizers. So they may ask you specifically about how sewage sludge can be used, or they can ask you green manures for an MCQ, or they can just ask you the difference between organic fertilizers and chemical fertilizers. That's again something that can be asked from this chapter. And lastly, the problem of global food security. But here, what they have asked is the role of biotechnology, which comes in the last chapter. So we'll talk about it over there. That brings us to the end of the part 1 of this discussion. In the next video, we'll discuss chapters 6 to 10. We'll see what are the important topics from these chapters based on the past year questions. And I'll also give you a few tips on how to write the answers for your EVS exam. So see you there.